Welcome to Today's Homeowner with Danny Lipford. Expert advice on improving your home from the pages of Today's Homeowner magazine and remodeling contractor Danny Lipford.
I can't tell you how many times homeowners have mentioned to me that they really dislike how their house looks from the street. Homeowners told me the same thing on this house because of the out-of-date look of the house. But with a couple weeks of careful planning and working with an architect, we came up with some great ideas to drastically change the look of the front facade of this house. With the addition of the new porch, new windows that'll be installed, new doorway, some real unique columns, and some synthetic stucco will make this house end up looking a lot like this. Stay with us, we'll be right back. You know, when you're doing a front facelift on a house like this, it's a perfect opportunity to update some of the old openings you may have in your house, like this antiquated metal non-insulated window that we have behind us. Really is a very inefficient unit. Also, the front door unit on this house, not very inviting. We'll change all of that with the work that's about to take place on the front of this house. Now, the house was built back in the 40s and had a very shallow porch and also some very unattractive wrought iron columns in the front of the house, really dated it. Now, we'll change all of that by enlarging the porch, building the large porch structure, and some very nice fiberglass columns that'll be installed will really give it a grand and welcoming feel when you drive up to the house. Now, in addition to correcting the old windows and old door, we also had to handle some waterproofing problems. A portion of this house is actually below grade, and the problem that occurred over the years is the water in this area of the yard was allowed to move right up against the wall, the front wall of the house, eventually found a crack in the masonry and started entering into the living area down below this. So one of the first things we had to do is to bring in a small backhoe and dig out a large portion of the dirt here to where we were approximately 8 feet deep. After that, we cleaned the wall very well and then applied a clear primer to provide a little bit of a sealer on the masonry surface itself. Then we were ready to install the waterproofing membrane. It has an adhesive back on it that allows us to stick it directly to the wall after the primer had dried for an appropriate amount of time. Then we continued putting layers of the membrane right on up to just below the level of the finished grade that we have. Then we were able to put in gravel, large gravel, to allow for a French drain, put a perforated sock pipe, more gravel, more fill dirt, and then very importantly, build the dirt up high enough to where no water can get close to the wall. The water will actually move away from the wall a good safe distance. Now, if you have a situation like this at your house, let me strongly recommend that if you're going to do some waterproofing and you're not knowledgeable about it, have a professional do it, because you only want to do it one time. The original wall of this house had no waterproofing on it at all, and that's where the problem occurred. Also, on your French drain, make sure you have a place to relieve the French drain, someplace for that water to flow, or you're defeating the purpose. Now, when we're talking about the foundation for this porch, we've treated this foundation just like we would if it was a living area, because it is supporting quite a load. What we started with is we started with a concrete footing here on the bottom. Then we brought our blocks on up to this point and then formed around it in order to produce a form board to pour this cap slab. Now, you can tell, let's see if I can knock a little piece of this off to give you an idea of how thick this is. Now, what we'll do later is bring bricks up to this point and they'll tie in, and we'll leave it a ½ inch high so that tile can be installed on the entire porch. Of course, we've built this good and solid because we have quite a roof to support. Now, the porch roof will have two stages, one here and one that steps up at this point, giving it some good height here in the front. And you have the nice gable up front and a smaller gable right over the door. And what's interesting here design-wise is the glass transom over the front door. The radius on it matches the radius here, as well as the radius on the little gable glass that we'll install here. Also, stucco accents will go around the new windows as well as around the new oval windows that we'll be installing. And with all the details we have on this front porch, we'll require a lot of framing.
ready to review your fix-it list as Danny and today's Homeowner Magazine repair and maintenance editor Joe Truini show you this week's simple solution. Brought to you by Dodge.
When you mention the word drywall to most homeowners, they think of a lot of dust. And usually it is a lot of dust because you have to sand to get a good finished look on it. But Joe's got an alternative that will minimize that dust.
Another way to smooth out a drywall joint rather than sanding it is to use a large sponge soaked in a bucket of warm water. All you need to do is wring out the sponge and gently go over the joint. You have to be patient because it does take quite a while, but little by little the water will soften the joint compound and smooth it out. The other thing that's important to remember is you have to rinse out the sponge frequently, otherwise it gets clogged up and doesn't work as well.
Now this method is good for small patches like we have here where a plumbing line was repaired. But if you're doing a whole room, unfortunately, you still have to handle it with sandpaper to get that good smooth finish. Well, the carpenters have really moved along great over the last couple weeks on our front facelift. They've completed almost all of the carpentry work on the front porch overhang. They're waiting for their custom door unit that'll be here in a couple days, which will have a large arch transom over the door. They'll use that as the radius for the new barreled ceiling, which will really be a focal point of the front porch overhang. Now also, they've completed 9 of the 10 fiberglass columns that are being installed, and we've recommended fiberglass to the homeowners because these columns are way out into the weather and there's going to be a good bit of rain hitting them, and these are so resistant to any type of water decay that we recommended these. But what we've had to do is to put some cross bracing. This is non-treated wood that's on the top of the column. We have treated on the bottom of the column that'll be sitting down on the masonry surface. We've screwed these in on each side. This will give a good flat surface to position against the beam up top, and the same with the masonry on the bottom. Well, this is the last column to go in. Let's see how it works out. Now the bases for the fiberglass columns are made out of polystyrene, so they're resistant to water damage as well. And what we've done is we put them down over our brick bases here in order to mark them out. You can see our heavy pencil mark along here. And what we'll actually do with these is slip them right up over the actual column so that they can be positioned and then drop back down. And what they'll be positioned on is a treated base that we have that we nailed down and screwed down, and you can see the straps that'll be used. I think they're ready to put it in place here. And of course, just using a simple car jack that we have here allows them to move it up or down when they're positioning the actual column. Okay, there we go. About 3 more inches. Okay, you're right there at it now. Now after they position it in place, and one of the real tricky parts of this is that this is a tapered column. So in order to level it, you're just about having to eyeball it, and originally when they built the base, they dropped a plumb bob down from the top to really center everything. So you're really doing your leveling from the center of the column instead of the outside like you would a square column. Now they'll be able to raise these up and pull these straps up and actually screw them in place. And then once they're screwed in place, they'll be able to drop this right back down over it in order to cover up that strap. Now our other crew is in the process of installing one of the last large windows, so let's take a look and see how they're doing. Now the old window that's being replaced is basically the same size as the new window. We chipped some bricks around the old metal window and removed it and basically threw it away. There was no value at all. After that, we did a little bit of adjustment in the framing and then came in using the same felt paper that we used on the sheathing to wrap this around to serve as a moisture barrier. Now this particular window manufacturer requires that you use a caulking to seal around the nailing flange that we did earlier in order to provide a good airtight seal. Now, of course, they'll be positioning this and leveling it up well, and then with the nailing flange, they'll be able to nail about every 8 inches all the way around the window so that it'll be good and secure. A good tip, anytime anyone's installing a window, to keep it locked until all of the installation's complete. This really helps to keep it good and square. Now, while they're finishing this up, let's check in with our best new product of the week.
It's time to check out this week's best new product with Danny and today's Homeowner Magazine Editor-in-Chief, Paul Spring. Brought to you by the Home Depot.
Paul, I think when homeowners are considering using a paint sprayer for some of their painting chores, they think about all the mess that it can make with the overspray, and the cleanup of some sprayers can be fairly difficult.
You're right, Danny. That can be a problem. What Campbell Hausfeld has done here is to produce a package that really is easy for homeowners to use with a sprayer. In fact, in the package itself, you can see the care they took. This is actually a stepping stool when you step on top of it. Let me show you the paint sprayer inside.
A number of accessories in here as well.
There are. They really haven't spared anything, and yet brought it in at a terrific price. As you can see, this is a little different animal. This is a high volume, low pressure sprayer. And low pressure is the key here because it allows you, even in interior jobs, to take the sprayer, point it right at even a piece of trim, and just get the paint right where you want to put it.
Okay, what about oil and latex? I know some sprayers require you to change the tip on it. What about this one?
This one will handle both, and in fact, there's another model that also handles decorative finishes, Dan.
Okay, what about cost for the whole package?
This is the HV1000 that runs about $170, which is a terrific price because they have all really the professional accessories that you want with a spray unit like this. You can see the 1-quart cup for the paint, and it even has adjustability for the spray itself and back here for the volume of air.
Great. Well, if you have some projects coming up around your house that will require a fair amount of painting, this may be just the thing to make it a lot easier. Even the homeowners are starting to forget what this house looked like just a month ago. Now that we've constructed the new front porch, replaced the windows and doors, really has made a change on the front of this house. One feature I really like on this porch is how we've created the barrel ceiling right in the middle of the porch ceiling. Now, the radius on the barrel ceiling actually matches the elliptical head radius of the transom we have over the new door units. Now, the way we were able to frame this is by using a 1/2-inch plywood template that allowed us to recreate, trace out the template. Then that was nailed in place on either end of the porch. Then using 2x6s with joist hangers, we tied all of that together to create that radius. Then coming back with 1/2-inch furring strips, we nailed those on to give us the nailing surface for our V-groove ceiling. Now, this is a 6-inch pine V-groove. It's fairly clear, a few knots here and there, but perfect for a ceiling like this. Actually, they're installing one of the last pieces here, and I can brag a little bit on the craftsmanship here because this board, the last one here, actually had to be beveled here on the end, as well as the new boards as they were installed. Each of those had to have a bevel in order to create the nice tight joint the carpenters were able to achieve here. Now, this is really such a good job here, the painter will have it real easy when he starts his caulking and his priming and his painting. Now, one of the things the homeowners really wanted to accomplish in the front facelift on their house is to raise the overall look of the front of the house. Now, the porch certainly helped in that way, but just as important, the oversized doors we have in terms of height. These are 8-foot doors instead of 6'8" that you would normally have. But because of the extra height on this, it really makes it look much taller than it actually is out front. Now, these are temporary doors that we put in during the construction phase. At the last part of the job, we'll install some nice mahogany doors here. After the woodwork's completed on the ceiling area of the porch, then it'll be time for the brick mason to come in and install some of the recycled bricks we saved during the early part of the project. He'll fill in all of the wall sections around the new windows, including the new oval window we installed in a small bathroom. Give some good natural light into that area. Now, another person that's busy out on the job today is our synthetic stucco contractor. He's already installed his 1/2-inch backer board on the gable area, and he's in the process of applying some of the early stages of the finish coats. After the cement board is installed, the first step is to cover all of the seams with fiberglass tape. Then the first coat of mortar cement mixture is applied using a trowel. This is called the base coat. After this dries for a day, the final coat is applied that contains the color tint. Now the color tint is mixed in the final coat before it's applied so that no painting should be needed for a long time. Now over this last week, our stucco contractor's completed all of his work here on the front of the house, and it really looks good in how it really turned out. Now that the brick mason's completed all of his work on the front of the house, now our stucco contractor can concentrate on all of the nice banding that's going around the windows and the doors. Now all of this banding is constructed out of fiberglass board. Let me show you. Now the fiberglass board we're using on this job is 1 inch thick, comes in 4x8 sheets, so it's real versatile on the things that you can create with this, and it's easily cut with either a razor knife or, in the case that Barry's using, our stucco contractor, a standard drywall knife. Now what he's doing is cutting out some keystones that are actually accent pieces that'll go on the top of the windows and the doors. You can see one that he's already completed here, and it's very, very simple, but once it's installed at the top of the window and then all of the stucco finish applied to it, really does add a lot to the overall look. Now you can see the door behind me, how the material's just been nailed using a large headed nail. Also glue's used many times to hold this together. Then another little band on the outside here. And then if you follow on around, you'll see where one of the keystones are in place at the top, ready for the finish to be applied. You may also notice all of the red taping that we have around this. This is just a protective measure to keep any of the stucco finish from getting on the bricks. It's a special tape that adheres well to the actual masonry surfaces. Now, like I said, with this, you're so versatile on the things that you can do in creating some real nice accent features, but most people tend to stick with the standard banding like we have here. Now, stay with us. When we come back, we'll show you this completed project on this front facelift.
Now, let's go outside for Around the Yard with Danny and lawn and garden expert Jennifer Brennan. Brought to you by Scott's Lawn Products, for a great lawn, guaranteed.
No matter what condition your grass is in, sooner or later every lawn will develop a low spot, which isn't good for the grass.
No, water will tend to sit in the low spot and kill the grass, and when you mow, the low spots get long and the edges get scalped.
Now I see people taking topsoil or sand and spreading it over some of the low spots in their yard. Is that a good idea?
It's okay, Danny, when there's less than 2 inches of depression, but if it's deeper than 2 inches, that sand or that soil will kill the grass plant. It's much better to do this technique.
Okay, and that's what we have here. A depression that was about 3 inches deep. We used the shovel earlier to cut like an H pattern here, and then allowed us to roll the grass back.
And then what you want to do is fill with a potting soil or extra filled soil, and fill in this area, smooth it out, and then you roll the turf back in place, firm it in, and then water it, and it will root back in, and you won't have any low spot left.
Well, what do you think? I think we made a dramatic difference in the curb appeal of this house through this facelift. Now, if you remember what it looked like before we started the renovation, it was a very dull, almost characterless house. But now, with adding the double gabled porch on the front of it and all the architectural lines, that allowed us to give it, really added to the overall look of the house. And with replacing all of the windows on the front of the house, not only improved the appearance, but certainly improved the energy efficiency of the home. But the 2 8-foot tall doors gave it that vertical lift that it needed in the appearance to give it that overall look that we've ended up with. Now, if you're not completely happy with the way the front of your house looks, consider talking with an architect or a designer who can give you some great ideas, maybe just some subtle changes that can dramatically improve the look of your house. I'm Danny Lipford, and we'll see you next week here on Today's Homeowner.